If you ask me, budget is in the right direction, setting a tone for this. But yes, for the near term, there could be some pain because there are certain areas where the income effect is still kind of something which is hampering purchasing of discretionary products, especially the two-wheeler side, largely on the commuter segment. So that segment, had that segment received some kind of income support, it would have been really heartening. But I think the government has taken a view that they would want to focus on infrastructure, expend more capex, ensure that utilization levels improve. Capex also has a multiplier effect on employment, and once the utilization levels improve, even the private participants will start kind of getting into the capex cycle. So that is the thought process, and I think the intent is right. Maybe next 6 months to an year would be challenging for us, but yes, from the government side, we will definitely see that.
So while our members are joining, I'll just quickly begin. Welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and pleasure to connect with everyone and our distinguished keynote speaker, who is handpicked because of the think, input, and the rich experience he brings in. Thank you also to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs and CXOs and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinars. This is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online mode as well. For those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for business leaders that's built in India. We currently focus on 20 sector communities such as e-mobility, renewable energy, automotive, real estate, and so on. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinar series and our digital publication, you will be happy to know that we have recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with over 10,000 plus like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these sectors. Those leaders among you who are interested, please just join us. I will share the link to the app in the chat section. I will soon be sending out invitations to our new guests post today's discussion. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's keynote speaker, Mr. Hemal Thakkar. He's the director at CRISIL. Mr. Hemal has 15 plus years of experience in the automotive and logistics segment. He currently leads CRISIL's customized research business, spreading across areas like demand forecasting, market opportunity assessment, and competitive benchmarking. Mr. Hemal in the past has worked on several marquee assignments for the automotive industry, like Automotive Mission Plan 2026, a joint 10-year forward-looking policy document for the automotive industry that included industry bodies like SIAM, ACMA, FADA, and TMA. He also worked with several OEMs and component manufacturers in the alternate fuel space, helping them understand how the powertrain mix across segments is expected to shape up going forward, especially considering the dynamic situation on ground with numerous options like petrol, diesel, natural gas, hybrids, EVs, and fuel cells being available, and also look at transitions in global geographies. And for today's topic, Mr. Hemal Thakkar will be discussing impact of union budget on the automotive industry and implications of the same across segments like electric vehicles. Now I request Mr. Hemal Thakkar to please begin the session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gautam, for that kind introduction. I'll just start sharing the screen. Just one moment. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So good evening, everyone, and thanks for this opportunity, Blue Circle, and kind of Gautam. So basically, I'll just start from a few things that have been mentioned as a part of the budget on the agri and rural side, and there is. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. On the agri and rural side. And I would there is a reason for covering this, which I'll cover in the subsequent slides. So basically, if you look at the overall union budget, there has been a strong focus on capex, as compared to fiscal 22 revised estimates. If you see, revenue expenditure is just expected to grow by 1%, while capital expenditure is expected to grow by 14.5%. Now, implications of, a few of these are visible here. If you actually look at things like, food subsidy bill, it's going to come down by about 28% from 2,90,000 crores to 2,05,000 crores. Another, kind of income generator for people in the rural space, that is Narega, is expected to come down from almost 1 lakh crores to about 73,000 crores in terms of allocation. Almost 25% of, these two major schemes allocations have come down, which will have major implications on, the incomes of people on the rural side, because the crop procurement will be low because of lower food subsidy and, infrastructure impetus through Narega, where, people are dependent on construction activities for their incomes, will also kind of see some kind of backlash because of this. What is very important to see is how each and every scheme is faring. So one, we spoke about food subsidy, where, the allocation has got reduced. In case of NHAI, we see that, it's increased from 65,000 crores to 1,34,000 crores. But what is very important is this is the gross budgetary support, which has been given for the current year. If you actually look at, extra budgetary resources which are provided, this number will turn out to be about 1,30,000 crores. There is a mere 3% increment that is there here. Narega has seen a decline, PM Kisan largely flattish, food subsidy again down. If you actually see Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which was spoken about, 48,000 crores allocation, 80 lakh houses to be built. Again, it's kind of more or less flattish. So in a way, if you actually see in most of the capex areas, as compared to this year's revised estimates, we are, kind of more or less there. We've not seen a major growth. You actually see this below. In case of NHAI, it's gone up from 1,30,000 crores, which now includes that extra budgetary support, to 1,34,000 crore, which is just an increase of about 3%, as I've mentioned here. And in Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, it's a 36% growth over revised estimates of 22. However, the implications of this, we'll talk in the subsequent slide. Also, if you look at the key announcements, which have been there from an automotive perspective, you'll actually see that the government has introduced a battery swapping policy, in the current year, with focus on interoperability standards, which will also lead to charging at any point of time on the go. So that is one thing with respect to charging and battery swapping policy, which is expected to be fleshed out and, out in the open in the next 2 months, as per, what the government has stated. Second, energy storage systems, including, kind of charging infrastructure and grid scale battery systems, will be included in the harmonized list of infrastructure. As I mentioned, 3% increase in NHI and 36% in Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. And food subsidy has been reduced by about 28% as compared to this year's revised estimates. Now, what are the implications of this? If you actually see, battery cost is close to 40% or a little higher, for most of the electric vehicles that are there in terms of, the total acquisition cost. Because of, battery swapping coming in, there will be standardization of batteries and, it will lead to economies of scale. It will probably help in, kind of hastening the EV adoption that we have, which is below 1% at this point of time. And, because of battery swapping and interoperability, it will actually fuel adoption, in the commercial segment, largely three-wheelers, taxis, light commercial vehicles, which actually have, a lot of issues with respect to whether the vehicle will run for so many kilometers. What if, my battery drains out in between, then what to do? So from that perspective, this will be a huge respite. And even, if there is a charging station in place, you would typically want to charge for at least 30 to 45 minutes, even in a fast charging station, for a three-wheeler, to at least get to 50 to 80% of the battery discharge rate. So from that perspective, if you ask me, swapping will work in, favor of, the industry, and it will in a way help in better asset utilization and also help the operator improve profitability, along with, addressing issues with respect to range anxiety. Also, because of this, what will happen is this will lead to, kind of evolution of new business models. Like, so now there is already a regulation in place which allows vehicles, to be sold without fixed batteries. which was put out by MORTH last year. And, kind of now batteries can be availed on a subscription basis, pay per use basis. So this will in a way reduce the acquisition cost for buyers, because today, 40% of the vehicle cost is the battery cost, at least 40%. And that is a huge differential that you have. And because of this, the prices of, price acquisition cost for the buyer could come down. Also, what will happen is, since energy storage systems, which I spoke about, that includes, your grid scale battery systems, charging infrastructure, etc., which were actually, which are now classified in the harmonized infrastructure list, which means, there will be a reduction in borrowing cost for these entities when they access capital. And, that is something which will largely be a pass through to the customer in a way. And, it will also help in reducing the cost for battery swapping, or, kind of, the charging cost for that matter, because the capital cost for the operator in a way will go down. Also, what we are seeing is, the spends on roads are maintained largely with respect to NHAI, with a 3% increase in allocation, which means there will be some positive rub-off on the medium and heavy commercial vehicles industry, largely the tipper segment and the, kind of MAV and tractor trailer segment. Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, though there is a 36% increment, there are two things. One, the quantum itself is relatively lower, about 19,000 crores. And if you actually look at the track record, last 3 odd years, the utilization level of PMGSY has been to the extent of only 70%. So for every 100 rupee allocated, only 70 has been, in a way used or exhausted. So from that perspective, the, kind of benefits could be limited. And because of, reduction in food subsidy bill, segments which are more dependent on the rural side, like say two-wheelers or tractor industry, could actually see some impact. And one should also, kind of be cognizant of the fact that, it's been a case that, we've had almost 4 years of near normal monsoon. God forbid, if the rain gods are not, kind of happy this year, and, we receive abnormal monsoons, then this could have a, very, negative rub-off effect. And, in a way, it could lead to problems with respect to income, on the rural side, and hence impacting a demand big time. So that's it that I had to cover as a part of the presentation today. In case if there are any questions, on the same, I'll be more than happy to, kind of answer the same.
Surely. So I'll just begin with the questions which we have received already.
Sure.
First question being is from Ashok Kumar. He asks, what plans other than the battery swapping policy does GOI put forth in the budget for EV infrastructure?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, apart from battery swapping, if you actually see, the government has given infrastructure status to energy storage systems, which includes, dense charging infrastructure as well as grid scale battery systems, and which will allow them to access capital at a lower cost. So this is another, kind of thing that they have put forth as a part of the budget, which will be more with respect to impact on electric mobility apart from battery swapping.
Okay. The next question I would jump to is, would be interested to knowing about the future of BEVs in India.
This is a very, kind of interesting question. So we'll go segment by segment. So if you actually look at two-wheelers, post the government of India increased subsidy under FAME, we've actually seen that, two-wheelers have become much more viable as compared to earlier. So once the government has increased subsidy from 10,000 to 15,000 rupees per kilowatt hour for the battery capacity, you're actually seeing 40 to 45,000 rupees as subsidy from the center side, considering a typical 3 kilowatt hour battery, for two-wheelers. So, even for 5 to 6,000 kilometers of running, your two-wheeler becomes viable today because your petrol cost is more than 100 rupees. So from that perspective, even today, two-wheelers have attained kind of parity. And, it seems that going forward, two-wheelers will see good adoption of electric vehicles, especially on the scooters side, where as per our assessment, we are seeing almost about 14 to 15% adoption of, kind of electrification or penetration of electrification in two-wheelers over the next 3 to 4 years or so. And if we look at a little long-term perspective, we'll see a much more higher adoption, northways of about 30-35%, could even be higher to the extent of 50 odd percent. Depends on, how two things happen. One, how battery prices, kind of shape up. Because this year we've seen a sudden increase or a surge in lithium prices, which would lead to some challenges for EV manufacturers to reduce cost in this year. But there are certain policies like PLI, etc., which are coming up, which will also lead to some pass through from the manufacturer to the user in terms of prices. And with slow and gradual reduction in battery prices, improvement in battery density, and increase in prices for ICE vehicles, we actually see that, once we reach 2030, the adoption levels should be really high for two-wheelers. With respect to segments like three-wheelers, again, adoption rates can be much higher than 55-60% by fiscal 30. There is an issue with respect to range anxiety today and, kind of charging infrastructure being not available. But battery swapping will help in, kind of addressing those issues to a great extent. And with charging infrastructure coming in and with the government pushing public sector enterprises, or OMCs, kind of set up charging infrastructure at their existing infrastructure, or, to set up charging infrastructure at newer places. And with government also providing, kind of various subsidies, land, etc., at a reasonable price, this is something which will pick up. Also, the new regulation which helps, home charging or, users to charge at home or in your societies will also propel adoption. So from that perspective, three-wheelers will also see faster adoption. In case of passenger vehicles today, what we've seen is, if you actually see, most of the buyers today are either second car buyers or a third car buyer in case of electric vehicles when it comes to the personal segment. Now, what we've realized is, for someone who can afford a 15 to 20 lakh or a 15 to 25 lakh EV, which is today, on offering. So you have a Tata Nexon, you have a Tata Tigor, you have a, say, Hyundai Kona, you have a MG EZS, Mahindra E-Verito, a few of these, which start right from 12 to 13 lakhs and go all the way to about 25-30 lakhs. So the buyer in this particular category is looking at a second vehicle or a third vehicle, and largely for city use. And he, kind of derives a lot of benefit, because the running cost is near 1 rupee 20 paise to 1 rupee 50 paise per kilometer, which is, much lower than about 6 to 7 rupee in case of a petrol vehicle, and, about 4 to 5 rupee in case of a CNG vehicle. So the delta is huge. So, he is the one who's driving that adoption. And of course, on the commercial side, if you have access to charging, this is one thing, which will propel adoption. So as per our understanding, we'll see close to 4 to 5%, kind of penetration for, electric vehicles in the passenger segment over the next 2 to 3 years. And by fiscal 30, we should see more than 20% adoption in this space, because the current acquisition cost delta is really huge.
Great.
Yeah, Gautam.
Very elaborate answer, I must say. Thank you so much. I'll now open up to the Q&A section. I'll start with a question received by Aishwarya. She's asking, are existing petrol pumps being considered for developing EV infra?
Yes, the government has, in a way, kind of tried to push the same. And that is something, that is, which is an ask from the government of India today. And a lot of, kind of OMCs like BPCL, IOCL, etc., have announced that, over the next 2 to 3 years, they will be setting up, large scale EV charging infrastructure in their existing, kind of petrol pumps, as well as at newer locations.
Great. I hope Aishwarya got the answer as well. Thank you. Moving on to Akshay's question, he asks, this is something which we already discussed in the pre-event call. He's saying that battery charging will require at least 30 minutes. What will the EV infra offer in terms of retail to customers to make use of this time?
A very good question. In fact, there is a huge thrust that the government is laying on things like wayside amenities. And, that is another big agenda that is there, on the, on the table of Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. And they are coming up with a lot of projects, in this direction also. So from that perspective, and also if you see, there is another, kind of statement which has come in from, the Ministry of Railways, also stating that they will be providing railway land for, kind of setting up charging infrastructure. So if you look at the wayside amenity things, especially on national highways, state highways, and with respect to railway stations, they are going to set up, QSRs or, other kind of wayside amenities where people can spend time while the time the vehicle gets charged. So that is something which is definitely under consideration. And in fact, a lot of it is also under implementation for that matter. So, over the next 2 to 3 years, we will see a lot of this being implemented real time.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll just wait until people start asking questions.
Sure.
Please, if anyone has any questions, it would be great if you could just put it on the Q&A section or in the chat section. I'll be able to see it, and I'll put it across to Mr. Thakkar right away. So we got a question from Aman Kotari. He's asking, do you think petrol, diesel cars will completely go out of our lives, and by when?
So that's a really tough one to answer, Aman. But yes, with the kind of intent that we are seeing from the government side, we'll see this much quickly than what we had anticipated maybe a couple of years ago. The government is clearly pushing for cleaner fuel or cleaner vehicles. So you are actually seeing increase or significant increase in adoption of CNG. So you earlier had a Maruti which used to provide factory fitted CNG option. Hyundai got into picture. Now you have Tata, which is kind of wanting and which has come up with options and has seen good success in the month of January, where they have sold more than 3,000 CNG Tigors and Tiagos. So from that perspective, if you ask me, the clear focus is going to be on kind of CNG and EVs. Of course, you will not have fossil fuels go away very quickly. Because as I said, acquisition cost difference is very, very high. Second, also, access to basic infrastructure for charging in case of passenger vehicles is, very critical, because typically passenger vehicles are also used for, longer distance travel during the weekends. So, if they offer you a range of about 150, 160 kilometers, there may be a lot of range anxiety unless, you have a reasonable charging infrastructure in place. And as someone asked, even if you spend 30 to 45 minutes at the charging station, what is it that you do at that point of time? So, wayside amenities should also be available. But yes, that is something which is definitely on the offing. So if you ask me, my personal sense is, maybe by 2040 or 2045, we should be in a position to see that, we are probably completely out of this fossil fuel thing and, moved on to EVs or even hydrogen fuel cell for that matter. These may be the two technologies which may exist at that point of time.
Thank you. I hope Aman received your answer as well. I'll move on to the next one, which is from Mr. Krishna Kumar. He asks, is there room for new EV players? Is there room for new EV players, and which segment is still having attraction?
So if you ask me, this is not a very easy question, and I'll tell you why. There are too many players in the E3-wheeler space as well as in the E2-wheeler space for that matter. Our belief is that, so if you ask me, there are three types of player if I have to broadly classify. One is the startup ecosystem, which is coming. So, you have players like, say, Ola, you have players like Simple Energy, you have Ather, a few of these players, who've made name for themselves and, who are selling a few units. You have, traditional players like Hero, Bajaj, TVS, of which two of them are active, that is Bajaj and TVS today. The remaining are slowly, gradually getting into this game. And the third is the non-conventional or the non-traditional players, who've been rock solid over the last 2 to 2.5 years. So the likes of Hero Electric, Okinawa, Ampere, etc. So basically, there will definitely be consolidation in the industry going forward. the traditional players are sitting on huge cash balances. I'm sure they are waiting for an opportunity, to kind of either gobble up the right company or looking for adoption to pick up, and they will get into an inorganic or acquisition spree. You've already seen a few organized players doing that, kind of acquiring a few companies, to kind of get faster access to technology, or kind of get access to a newer way of kind of looking at things. So for example, Hero took over Gogoro. TVS has made a few investments. Hero has a JV with Gogoro. Sorry for kind of that error. And but TVS has acquired a few companies, so that is giving them access to different kind of technology. So there is going to be play for everyone, but kind of making money and surviving in this business for long term is going to be pretty challenging for players who are having fringe volumes, and they will find it difficult to kind of survive going forward. And we feel that any industry can have kind of 7 8 good players as a part of the overall industry. Anything beyond that may be very very difficult, because this is a fairly organized industry as such. You can't afford it to be something like what is there in China, which is flooded by low speed two wheelers, and they'll have some thousands of OEMs who are selling it. So I don't foresee that happening in India, at least. I don't know if I have answered your question completely, but
I think it kind of sums up the view at least.
yeah,
So
yeah.
move on to the next question. It's more on outlook of the budget. Mr. Rajesh Nath has asked, and he said first that this budget is termed as Invest in India budget. So what are your views here?
Uh, so good evening, Mr. Nath. So, so if you ask me, yes, as I said, the budget actually sets a tone for maybe 2 to 3 years. That capex is going to be one area where the government is going to be focusing on, and the government is going to be focusing on green, clean mobility or new age sectors. And the government is wanting to kind of support these industries over the kind of mid to long term, if you ask me. And if you see, they have kind of increased allocation to kind of solar cell manufacturing from 19,500 crores to almost about 25,000 crores. So you can actually see that intent. I will not be surprised that allocations to PLI are relooked at going forward if there is further need for allocation to these sectors to increase adoption or improve adoption, because we have seen PLI in advanced cell chemistry, we have seen PLI in electronics, we have seen PLI in the automobile kind of segment. So from that perspective, kind of if you ask me, budget is in the right direction, setting a tone for this. But yes, for the near term, there could be some pain, because there are certain areas where the income effect is still kind of something which is hampering purchasing of discretionary products, especially the two wheeler side, largely on the commuter segment. So that segment, had that segment received some kind of income support, it would have been really heartening. But I think the government has taken a view that they would want to focus on infrastructure, expend more capex, ensure that utilization levels improve. Capex also has a multiplier effect on employment. And once the utilization levels improve, even the private participants will start, kind of getting into the capex cycle. So that is the thought process. And I think the intent is right. Maybe, next 6 months to a year would be challenging for us. But yes, from the government side, we will definitely see that push. And I'm very sure that, investments will come into India in the mid to long term.
Thank you. That was great to hear that. I think what I'll do is we're a little short of time, so
Sure.
maybe I'll skim through the questions and just take your key takeaways from each of them. This one is from an anonymous attendee, didn't want to tell their name. The question is, first the comment is impact on the auto ancillary players. Question is, what are the major differences between petrol or diesel auto versus an e-vehicle?
Okay, so basically, the entire powertrain will cease to exist for a kind of EV vehicle. You will have an electric powertrain, but you will not have an engine. physically. And so you will have a battery, you will have a motor, you will have a much more powerful battery than what you have today. You will have a lithium ion battery as compared to your lead acid battery today. It will also give rise to newer, kind of industries. Like say, for example, you will have an onboard charger, you will have a motor, you will have a traction controller, and lot many stuff. And, a few of them will also, kind of see some pressure with respect to, kind of ceasing to exist. So something like a fuel injection, etc. So, it will also give rise to a few opportunities, and it will also give, it will also put some pressure on a few players. But I still feel that, there is going to be enough time for players to, kind of come out of the, combustion engine space and get into the EV space. Because on the auto component side, you also have a huge aftermarket element which exists today, which can be used as a balancing, kind of, I would say, which can be used to balance things. Yes, the contribution of aftermarket is today fairly low, but from that perspective, it's applicable to the entire park of vehicles. Yes, there will be some components which will face heat, but it is always a trade-off, when a newer technology is introduced at any point of time.
Surely. There's a question from Rishabh Chauhan. I'll just reframe it. He's asking from a perspective of the circular economy. Is there an opportunity that the government is looking at for the battery waste management system?
Yeah, so I'll just tell you. So, for example, if you ask me, urban mining is a thing, that Niti Aayog is working on, along with the government of India. And that is what they term as, kind of battery recycling for that matter. And they are working very actively on that front. And you will soon see some, kind of momentum in that direction, because they are also aware of the fact that today lead acid batteries, can be recycled to the extent of 96%. But when it comes to, lithium ion batteries, the recyclability is relatively lower. So from that perspective, almost 70% of lithium ion content can be recycled, and most of it will be in the form of landfill. So for an agrarian country like ours, that could be a little critical. So, kind of disposing that in the right manner and recycling that in the right manner is going to be a very, very important initiative. There are also a few corporates, who've started to work in that direction. So, there were a few of them like Tata Chemicals, who had made an intent to get into this space. So from that perspective, yes, there is a serious thought given, around this. And the government, along with its think tank, Niti Aayog, is also working in this direction.
Okay. So I'll move on to the next question from Mr. Prashant Kole. From pollution control perspective, does it really look effective? I mean, for additional demand of electricity for production from coal will be needed, and that will create more pollution. So complete elimination of pollution, is it possible? And what is the kind of USP for EV apart from cost effectiveness? Your take on it.
Yeah, so you will actually not see complete elimination of pollution, kind of two things, of course, coal will still continue to be the primary source of energy for India. But, there are aggressive targets that we have taken with respect to solar, with respect to hydro. So from that perspective, from the supply side, you will actually see migration towards renewable energy sources rather than towards, kind of coal. So yes, I understand that, if you kind of use more coal to produce power, you are actually polluting at the source and not polluting in the cities where electric vehicles are being used. But, there are several studies which have been taken, which have been undertaken globally, which says that, this concept of well to wheel, right from, the time the coal is burnt to generate electricity, all the time, to the time the vehicle, kind of emits pollution. It says that, emission at an overall level will come down if you use EVs as compared to traditional vehicles. But what is very important is, since the supply side is also changing simultaneously, you slowly moving to solar, you moving to hydro, and the supply side mix of energy generation also changing will, in a way help. Also, if you actually see, the government is not only working on electric mobility, but, green hydrogen is something that they are also focusing on, where they will be, kind of, there will increasingly be a pressure on, sectors like steel, cement, which use a lot of energy for, kind of various purposes, for their boilers, captive power plants, etc. And, they will have to go towards greener modes. So at an overall level, they are moving in the right direction. In the current budget also, you've seen higher allocations for solar, higher allocation for solar cells, higher, kind of megawatt capacity being set up for solar. So from that perspective, we are moving in the right direction. The results may not come up in a day or so. It will take a couple of years. But I'm sure, the commitments that we've made to COP26, we are actually moving in the right direction with respect to those commitments.
True. Manish Mehta has asked a two-part question. I'll address both. One is, how will the current auto ancillary units survive or grow in the EV era? Second is there any advanced technology required for mechanical EV components?
So the first one, I think, I have partially answered by stating that, this will also give birth to newer, kind of components coming in, which were not the case earlier. So, you will have a electric motor which comes in, you will see battery cells coming in, you will see BMS coming in, you will see a traction controller coming in, you will see an onboard charger coming in. So a lot of things, which will come in, in terms of opportunity when it, comes from a component perspective. And what was the second question that he had?
Second was, is there any advanced technology required for mechanical EV components?
See, if you ask me what is currently going to be very, very important is addressing the range anxiety that people are facing. So globally, everybody is working towards improving the battery density. So with the same capacity, the vehicle can run for more number of kilometers. And at the same time, kind of rationalizing the use of resources which are used for a battery, because they are limited. So you are also seeing a lot of, kind of people now starting to work on sodium as, one of the base raw material for battery. So you've seen CATL do something, patent its technology. You've seen Reliance acquire some UK-based company, which has a patented sodium-based battery. So, there is something going on in that direction, and which will take some time. But if you still ask me, yes, there is a lot of technology development happening, in this space, largely with respect to battery and battery cells. In the other areas, the kind of technology intensity would be very similar to what you have in case of ICE, and, you may not see a major, kind of stuff. Maybe in case of motors, you would want to move to better quality motors, especially with respect to three-wheelers, etc. Where you have a 0.7 to 1 kilowatt hour motor today, you would want to move to a 3 kilowatt motor. But that is something, which is already existing. You may be doing it for some other applications. Or maybe for higher end, kind of vehicles like, say, passenger vehicles or buses, you may want to get into PMSM motors, where again, the technology may be quite different than what you have for BLDC motors. So that is again a technology change. So there will be certain components where this will be more prominent, and a few of them, where you may not see a major change happening.
True, very well said.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take one last minute of yours and just one last question.
Sure.
Come from Sajal. He has asked why e-cycle are not included in the PLI scheme, because it's a big export opportunity for India.
It's a very important point. And if you ask me, the bicycle industry is very, very huge in India. So from that perspective, I think there is definitely something, which is ongoing. And, there are discussions which are going on. A few states are also looking at it. So say, for example, the likes of Maharashtra, Haryana, West Bengal, these guys are also looking at, a policy for e-cycle. And similarly, even the central government is exploring something. Basis what I understand through a few informal communication that I have had with a few of them, there is definitely a policy, which is coming in the next few days. So, this is something which will get addressed in the near term.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we've covered pretty much everything for today. It was such an insightful and engaging session, and a privilege to hear you. Our guest and I have been hooked on till the very end, and I've taken home several nuggets. And thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the very end and for always asking excellent questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.